It is home to 600 animal species and several million plants. 6 railroads run through its grounds. It contains 600,000 items in its museum collections. 4,000 stage performances and films are presented here annually. Every year, its residents consume 21 tons of bamboo. This place provides an unparalleled mix of nature and culture. It is not a country or even a state. It is a park, and the story of its humble origins and big dreams is extraordinary. A century ago, people like President Theodore Roosevelt and landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted saw the need for creating and preserving great public spaces for the wellness of their neighbors. Studies show that the effects of urban planning directly influence our health and behavior. More simply, a city's well-being may depend on how it manages its public spaces. Parks are used to commune, to learn, and importantly, to play. Their influence can be global and their reputations mythical. Philadelphia has its Fairmount. New York has its Central Park. San Francisco has its Golden Gate. San Diego is no exception. Located in the center of San Diego, its footprint is larger than that of Central Park. The park is divided into 3 primary areas, driven largely by its geography. The East Mesa is a recreational hub. The Central Mesa houses more than 20 museums and attractions. The West Mesa is largely a city park, used for leisure and local events. Balboa Park is home to such a diversity of microhabitats, plants and animals, and cultural institutions that there is truly no place like it in the world. However, it has taken a century to get here. This creation of the late 1800s came when a handful of reformers sought only to preserve a piece of nature in their young city. In 1867, real estate developer Alonzo Horton visited San Diego in a quest for new property. Within a year, Horton bought up 800 acres at 33 cents apiece in what would eventually become downtown San Diego. Horton knew that having a large public space was crucial to helping the city flourish. So in 1868, along with city trustee Ephraim Morse, Horton convinced the city to set aside 1,400 acres of public land northeast of his recent purchase. Originally called City Park, San Diego's new public land evolved slowly, as the city's population was only 2,300 in 1870. In the late 1880s, however, population growth from the arrival of the Santa Fe Railway spurred progress in the southwest corner of the park. George Marston, San Diego's leading merchant, hired the superintendent of Central Park, Samuel Parsons Jr., to prepare City Park's first master plan in 1903. After more than 30 years, the park finally began to take shape. 3,800 miles southeast of San Diego, the monumental Panama Canal project was just 6 years from completion. The canal could be a game changer for San Diego as it connected the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, making it the first port of call on the Pacific coast of the United States. A big idea emerged. G. Aubrey Davidson, the president of San Diego's Chamber of Commerce, proposed that the city celebrate the opening of the Panama Canal with a large event to promote San Diego's new status. Originally conceived as a World's Fair, the 1915 Expo, in the end, became the Panama California Exposition, giving San Francisco the International Exposition to demonstrate their recovery from the 1906 earthquake and fire. While small on size, San Diego was large on ambition. They wanted to do something grand to put their city on the map. An expo would allow them to have the spotlight on a larger stage and help bolster an economy still shaky from the 1907 Wall Street panic. Thus, plans for a 1915 exposition were hatched. City Park was chosen as a site and renamed Balboa Park in honor of Vasco Núñez de Balboa, the first European explorer to reach the Pacific Ocean. Bertram Goodhue, a New York architect, was hired to design the park's grounds. The city and private donors raised more than $6 million. In today's economy, that would equal approximately $145 million, and that with a population of less than 40,000. This triggered the groundbreaking on July 16, 1911. Today, Balboa Park is home to more than 15,000 trees from 348 different species, 19 gardens, including the Japanese Friendship Garden, rose, palm, and cactus gardens, all thrive in San Diego's climate. The centerpiece of the gardens is the Botanical Building. It houses more than 2,100 orchids, palms, ferns, and even carnivorous plants. While today's park is renowned as a lush botanical garden, that wasn't always the case. Still, even in its undeveloped state, the park's first master planner, Samuel Parsons Jr., marveled at the park's setting and potential. He remarked on its spreading mesas and rugged, picturesque canyons, its views to San Diego Bay and backcountry mountains, and prime location in the city center. There is nothing like it among the parks of the world. Consequently, both large and small projects have sought to claim some of the enviable space. The only lasting incursions have been the construction of San Diego High School in the 1870s, the space granted to the U.S. Navy for the Naval Hospital in 1919, and Roosevelt Middle School built in the 1920s. The Naval Hospital received additional land in the 1980s. While city officials were developing ideas for Balboa Park, one woman, Kate Sessions, would be responsible for propelling its evolution from barren plot to botanical oasis. Sessions, who contributed to the landscaping of the recently opened Hotel del Coronado, saw the park as a perfect place to grow a variety of plants. She signed a 10-year lease for 32 acres at 6th and Upas for her nursery. Every year, she donated 100 trees to the park and 300 to the city as payment. With Sessions' horticultural contributions, Parsons' planning, Goodhue's architecture, and voters' bond approvals, the stage was set for an event that would bring visitors to San Diego by the millions. Before today's era of instant access to global information, expositions were used to draw large numbers of people together to experience grand events that were one part educational, one part spectacle, and one heaping part salesmanship. For San Diego, the time had arrived. The plans were drawn. The buildings were ready. The trees were planted. And to the south, ships were navigating successfully through the Panama Canal. 3.5 years after groundbreaking, opening day brought tens of thousands of people swarming through exhibits, listening to musical acts, and marveling at the latest technologies. The 1915 Expo would largely focus on education and commerce. Exhibits were built to showcase the product offerings and manufacturing process of specific industries. A working film studio, a Brazilian coffee exhibit, a tea plantation, a model farm, and more. The Liberty Bell made the train trip from Philadelphia. A Japanese tea pavilion greeted guests. Electric carts or electric cats dodged pigeons brought in for the occasion. And what would a fair be without curiosities and a little whimsy?
Welcome, one and all, to the Fun Zone here at the Panama, California Exposition. Walk along the isthmus and marvel at wonders from around the globe. Unwind at the Temple of Mirth, but don't miss the ostrich farm. Climb the Yelps or rush over to the gem mine and discover brilliant stones. Or just take in the hula dancing at our tropical Hawaiian village.
Numerous celebrities and politicians visited the expo, from Fatty Arbuckle to Thomas Edison and Henry Ford to Presidents Taft and Theodore Roosevelt, who addressed Navy cadets. After claiming success, organizers decided to continue the expo into 1916. It became truly global as exhibits from San Francisco's World's Fair traveled south for the second-year extension, renamed the Panama, California International Exposition. Along with additions to the cultural pursuits, more whimsical acts also joined the lineup.
Hold on to your hats at the alligator farm and witness the spectacle at the Wild Animal Show.
The two-year expo forever changed San Diego by spurring its population and leaving a lasting cultural and natural footprint. 20 years later, a second expo would call Balboa Park home. The California Pacific International Exposition was the brainchild of Frank Drugan. This time, organizers saw the event as an antidote to the Great Depression. They hoped the event would stimulate the area economy and create jobs. They were able to surpass their fundraising goals and collected $700,000. On opening day, visitors flooded the park, as they had 2 decades earlier. While the 1935 Expo had educational and cultural components, escapism was a consistent theme, and as such, visitors saw an increase in the level of spectacle and flamboyance. And the commercial presence was highly visible, with new structures such as the Standard and Shell Oil buildings. A Spanish flavor was everywhere. Dancers and musicians from Latin traditions contributed a lively mood.
Come one, come all, to see the wonders of the 1935 Expo Extravaganza. Head to the amusement zone with its auditorium showcasing exhibits from Ripley's Believe It or Not. Strike it rich at Gold Gulch. Sneak a peek at Zorro Gardens, the Expo's nudist colony. See the famous Sally Rand perform twice daily burlesque shows at the Palace of Entertainment. For those preferring a slower pace, visit the Turtle Farm. Alpha the walking robot roams the expo grounds and smokes cigarettes. And finally, join the elephants for a tea party.
As with the previous expo, this one brought its share of dignitaries. Current President Franklin D. Roosevelt surveyed the festivities, and his wife, Eleanor, lunched at the park. President Hoover addressed the crowds. And later, on January 1st, 1936, Roosevelt pressed a gold telegraph key in the White House to light the second year of the expo. While the 2-year event brought in 7.2 million visitors, nearly double the total of the first expo, it netted only $10,000 more. To house the exhibits, temporary structures were built. The building's popularity sparked debate over whether to deconstruct or retain them. Only the Cabrillo Bridge, the Botanical Building, the California Building and Tower, and Spreckels Organ Pavilion were designed to be permanent.
The buildings were threatened to be torn down because they were temporary buildings. They were ornamentation, and the buildings were plaster of Paris and chicken wire.
Since the expos, saving, restoring, and recreating that original architecture would be the focus of significant volunteer community efforts and considerable expense. Several waves of restoration have ensued with a repeated cycle of fundraising and building.
1967 was when the Committee of 100 started. That committee was headed by my mother, B. Evenson. Getting the backing of 100 wonderful, hardworking women to have the city be beautified, that was her sole goal and aim.
Civic pride, philanthropy, and volunteerism have provided the foundation for many of the park's largest initiatives. In addition to the Committee of 100, other key groups are focused on preserving the park's legacy. Because the architecture harkens to European roots, Balboa Park is the kind of place that looks older than it actually is. The Spanish-influenced architecture envisioned by Goodhue evoked the overall influence of Spain and Mexico on the region. The representation, however, was more of a fantasized view, as opposed to one based on reality. Despite its whimsical roots, the Spanish colonial revival influence has been enormous in California. Red tile roofs and Mediterranean-style stucco houses have become an architectural staple in the years following that first expo. Before then, they didn't exist here. Some of the legacies of the expos, such as the structures and landscaping, may seem predictable. Others are surprising, considering their humble origins. No one could have foreseen that a zoo of international reputation would be born of the 5 mini-zoos featured in the Panama, California Expo. Lions and other large mammals were displayed in makeshift cages. An aviary was built near 6th Avenue. In 1916, Dr. Harry Wegeforth created plans to maintain a zoo upon the expo's closing.
There was a whole herd of elk brought into Balboa Park that were just roaming around free as part of the expo. And there were lions in cages. And that's really kind of the history of the San Diego Zoo. Was Dr. Harry Wegeforth, who was a surgeon in downtown San Diego at the time. He and his brother were driving by and they heard those lions roar. And so the history of the zoo is it began with the roar.
From the beginning, the zoo was envisioned as a place for both animals and unique plants to thrive. A century later, 700,000 plants populate the 100 acres of world-class botanical gardens. Those plants are used to create the appropriate environments for their animal inhabitants, using species from their native lands. Experts on eucalyptus, bamboo, and other plant varieties ensure that the vegetarian diets of koalas, pandas, and other inhabitants are well supplied. Research and conservation for both plants and animals are pillars of the zoo's mission. 200 scientists work at the zoo, the safari park, and the San Diego Zoo Institute for Conservation Research. They have successfully reintroduced numerous species back into the wild and are widely recognized for their giant panda breeding program. The expos had other legacies beyond the architecture and zoo. The Panama, California Exposition was crucial to the city's effort to convince the Navy to make San Diego Bay its permanent gateway to the Pacific. In April 1914, Assistant Secretary of the Navy Franklin D. Roosevelt visited San Diego to drive across the new Cabrillo Bridge and to assess the viability of a naval training station. Roosevelt emerged as a major supporter for expanding the Navy in San Diego. On April 6, 1917, Congress declared war, and any plans for the park were immediately dropped. The city spent nearly $30,000 to alter the park for military use. By the end of 1917, more than 5,000 recruits were training in the park. They drilled in the plaza, ate outside in the courtyard of the Café Cristobal, and slept in tents. As the park went to war, the remaining exposition buildings and grounds found new uses. Military and civilian organizations cohabitated. Concerts continued unabated in the Spreckels Organ Pavilion. Special civic and sporting events took place at the Balboa Stadium. The first military occupation was short-lived. With peace declared on November 11, 1918, the military left the park for more permanent bases around San Diego. The race was on to use the exposition buildings rather than demolish them. 2 decades would pass before the next military presence in the park. Initially, sunny San Diego felt far from the gloom that had spread across Europe and Asia as World War II engulfed both continents and threatened to erupt further. Then, almost overnight, San Diego was transformed from a sleepy border town to a teeming wartime metropolis. An influx of civilian and military personnel caused the city's population to soar. In 1 year, the population had increased from 203,000 to more than 300,000. On Sunday, December 7, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. With President Roosevelt's official declaration of war, San Diego quickly mobilized to defend itself. Military bases and camps expanded still further and spilled into Balboa Park. The military required more training ground and adequate space for the injured. Acting Commandant of the 11th Naval District, Captain Byron McCandless, claimed 8 park buildings immediately and 4 more to follow soon after. The park remained open for more than a year, but the demands for more space and support forced almost all institutions to shutter their doors by March 1943. With the entire park occupied, the Second World War made the grounds look drastically different than during World War I, and Balboa Park made a picturesque setting for the 12,000 men and women who worked or recuperated at the expanded Balboa Naval Hospital. Victory in the Pacific finally brought an end to the war. VJ Day signaled the end to a monumental period in the city's history. Within a month of Japan's surrender, the military occupants of the park began making plans to return the grounds back to public use. The federal government gave the city $790,000 for the project. Retrieving the museum's displaced collections was a significant undertaking. They gathered pieces sent to private homes and other institutions for safekeeping. As the collections returned to Balboa Park, so did the people. The recovery has been significant. Each year, more than 6 million visitors experience the park's 19 museums, which represent a diverse array of artifacts and research disciplines. The objects found in both the exhibits and archives run the gamut from a world-class Rembrandt to a quirky miniature railroad, from jars of preserved rattlesnakes to antique masks from Papua New Guinea. Perhaps unlike anywhere else, visitors can stroll in and out of the multitude of museums and gardens against a soundtrack of sidewalk musicians. years, the museums have hosted memorable exhibits, from the Fabergé eggs at the Art Museum to the Dead Sea Scrolls at the Natural History Museum. Since the first expo, Balboa Park has provided the stage for thousands of actors, dancers, and musicians of all ages. Founded in 1935, the Old Globe is widely regarded as one of the country's premier regional theaters. Many prestigious actors have chosen to perform on one of the Old Globe's 3 stages. Numerous Tony Award-winning productions were born here.
What's unique about it is the fact that it's outside. It's outside, number one. It's also butted right up against the San Diego Zoo. So while we're performing at night, yes, we have planes here, there may be an ambulance, but every night we hear the lions roaring, we hear the seals in the background, which is great to have, which lends to the magic of working outside, but also, honestly, to perform Shakespeare under the stars is phenomenal.
3 well-established performing arts institutions for youth were born in the 1940s. San Diego's Junior Theater, the nation's oldest continuing program, the San Diego Youth Symphony, and the San Diego Civic Youth Ballet.
You have one youth group in one place, which is our youth group, the Youth Symphony. Then you have a dance group, the youth dance group, and the room right next door. And then right next door you have a theater group. So it's really nice just to see all these, young people getting into the arts.
Since the 1950s, children have enjoyed performances at the Marie Hitchcock Puppet Theater. The Spreckles organ is the largest outdoor organ in the Western Hemisphere. It was a gift from tycoon John D. Spreckles and his brother Adolph, and has provided free concerts since its dedication on the eve of the first expo. The mid-1960s brought some rising musical stars to the park. Both the Rolling Stones and Beatles performed here early in their careers. While millions of tourists visit Balboa Park every year for its famous institutions, it is still a neighborhood park to thousands of local residents and regional getaway for many more. As the park is a cultural center, it is also a recreational hub. Picnics, weddings, parades, festivals, and charity runs are regular occurrences in the park. And many locals include the park in their daily rituals while playing tennis, swimming, or hiking in the canyons.
And on the east side of the park, you have the big, massive sports participation fields, Morley Field, the velodrome, the baseball fields, the frisbee golf, the golf course, the bocce fields, and it's just great. And it's so wonderful to be able to experience all of it.
Gangs of Segway riders swerve through the park. Cyclists gather regularly to kick off tours of the city. Amateur photographers try to capture reflections on the lily pond. Some learn to act or play the clarinet, and others to play basketball.
And one day I came up out of the canyon and I stumbled across Muni Gym and saw these 3 magnificent full courts and just open play. And it was a dream come true. And Muni is where I learned how to play basketball.
The artists' workshops of the Spanish Village, the international houses, and an antique carousel are frequented by locals and tourists alike. There are local clubs built around practically every hobby and interest. Certainly in its next century, Balboa Park will grow and change in ways we can't now predict. New technology will influence the museum and entertainment experience. Virtual socializing may change the way we use this and other public spaces. The greatest challenge will be, as it has always been, how to preserve this treasure, not only the land, but also the history and culture that live here. In the meantime, we will all continue to enjoy the park. The jewel of San Diego is both well-loved and yet waiting to be discovered.
Balboa Park is...
Balboa Park is...
Balboa Park is...
Balboa Park is...
Balboa Park is a living piece of art and culture.
Balboa Park to me is memories.
We have what they be the jewel of California or maybe the United States. And I think when tourists come, they're just overwhelmed.
It's my favorite place in San Diego, by far.
Balboa Park is one of the coolest places to visit in San Diego.
A place of history and art. I really love it. It has lots of nature.
Balboa Park is childhood memories with my family.
Balboa Park is a perfect day.
It has a garden and a bunch of life living around it.
We all have a place and we all love the park. So it creates an opportunity in a community like this for everyone to come together and really celebrate not only their diversity, but the things they share together.
Balboa Park is the perfect afternoon with my dog.
You get a variety of people, culture, art. This is an amazing place.